Now let me tell you about snapping, pivots, and groups. Snapping is how we can snap an object from one object to another within our scene, or we can snap an object along the grid lines of our scene. A pivot is the point in space where the object's manipulator is found. And a group is simply multiple objects grouped together so we can move them around as one object. Now let me demonstrate this for you. The first thing I want to go over is snapping. If I drop a cylinder in the scene, and I hold X, and then drag an arrow, it'll snap along the grid lines. If I hold X and drag the center of the manipulator, it'll snap the object to the grid itself. The next type of snapping is object snapping. If I create another object in the scene, and then I hold V on the keyboard, or Victor, and then drag an arrow, it'll try to snap to the other object. This is object snapping. If I drag the center point while holding V, or Victor on the keyboard, it'll allow me to maneuver the object to the corner of this other object. The next thing I want to go over is pivots. An object's pivot is the location of the manipulator inside of the object, or where the manipulator actually resides. If I want to change where this manipulator is located, I can do this by holding Delta or D on the keyboard. Then I can drag the arrow and it'll move the object's pivot. Now I can rotate this object around this location. I can scale it as well, and it'll pull the object toward this location. Let's say I want to get the manipulator back to the center of this object after I had already moved it. I can simply do that by going to the Modify menu and Center Pivot. This will place the object's manipulator, or pivot, back at the center of the object. Now let's say I want to actually snap my pivot along the grid. I can do this by holding Delta and X-ray, or D and X on the keyboard, and then I can middle mouse drag and it'll snap the pivot along the grid. Now what about snapping to an object? I can do this by holding Delta and Victor on the keyboard, and then middle mouse dragging to snap it along the object. I can also snap it to another object as well. These are the different types of pivot snapping that we can do. Finally, I'll demonstrate groups. In order to do this, I'm putting a few objects in our scene. Now that we've got a few objects, what I can do is simply drag select by clicking outside of the objects in the viewport and dragging across our screen. I can also select multiple objects by holding Shift and clicking each object I want to select. Once I have all these objects selected, I can go to Edit and Group. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and then we'll create a group. Now what I can do is I can actually move this object around, and I can rotate it as one object. However, if I select off of this, and then I select one object, notice how the other two aren't selected? This means I can move this object individually. Now if I wanted to actually move the group again, I could just hit the up arrow on the keyboard, and this will climb in the group's hierarchy. In order to show you this, I'm going to go ahead and open the outliner. If you don't have this icon, you can do that through Windows, Outliner. Here we can see it says Group. If I open this group up, I can see 3 objects. Here if I select one of the objects, you'll notice it selects one of the objects in my outliner. I can also name this group by selecting it here, or selecting an object out here, hitting the up arrow on the keyboard, and then naming the group. And that's pretty much all there is to groups. Now I'm going to show you how to model an object using snapping, pivots, and groups. So let's model a table for our first prop. I'll go ahead and select a cylinder. I'll hold X, snap it to the center of the grid, and I'll scale it out and scale it up for a little bit of height. I'll raise it within the scene, and then I'll grab another cylinder. Holding X, I'll snap it to the center of the grid. Once I do this, I'll scale it up until it hits the top of the table. Next, I'll change camera angles, and I'll hold Delta and Victor, grab the top arrow, and I'll snap to the bottom of this object. Then I'll hit R, and I'll scale it down, and I'll scale it up a little bit. Next I'll hit Edit, Duplicate. I'll scale this down and then scale it up until it collides with the bottom of the table. Then I'll select the base of the table, hit Edit, Duplicate, scale it down, and scale it out, and scale it down once more. This will give me the base of the table. Next I'll check for proportion. I'll scale the top piece down a little bit, and now my table's done. I'll select all the pieces, and I'll go to Edit, Group. I'll change the name of this to Table. Now I'm done with the table. I can manipulate individual pieces, or I can manipulate the whole thing by selecting one piece, hitting up on the keyboard, and moving the object or prop within our scene. I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.